Esta conferencia comenzará a grabarse.
Hola, Daniel.
Buenos días, Daniel.
Buenos días.
¿Ya salió a la calle tu hija ayer? ¿La Peque?
La pequeña sí. La mayor no tenía ganas, inexplicablemente.
You know, from yesterday, the children here in Spain can go out to have 1 hour in the street, play. That's a big change for them.
Good morning, Antonio.
Morning, Ula. Welcome. So, today we will try a new phase in our meetings. We were speaking yesterday about the need to highlight what we are doing in terms of results. And we decided to introduce at the beginning of every day session reference on what we are doing. They're speaking from cluster, but also from companies in any case collaboratively. Okay, so as it was a decision taken yesterday, today the idea was to present you this, not to really discuss one case. We could, if you want to share one case, okay, but I wanted to share with you this decision. We are working on I will share my screen, sorry. On a form to retrieve information about this case of practice or best cases or references, okay? The idea is to being able to store them and have them as reference for other cluster or other entities that could benefit from their knowledge, okay? This is a form, we need to discuss it in the Slack. It's there in the Slack in edit mode, so we could work on it during, I think, this morning, today. The idea is to request the name of the practice, the name of the entity. There are different categories. A summary, some keywords. In the sectors, I think that we could include the list of ecosystems that are announced from the European Commission. But as far as I know, Ula, Thierry Breton spoke about them during the last speech, but the list is not published yet, no, Ula?
This is perfectly right. The list is not published yet because we are working on it. In the sense, he only wants to publish a list when he's sure that the economic figures which we are elaborating for each of the ecosystem is robust enough. And of course, this takes time because we are looking on how it was before, but also the effects, the economic effects which these ecosystems have. And this is, of course, as you can imagine, quite difficult to get these figures and estimates now. And he wants them to thoroughly himself go through all of this. I mean, some of the ecosystems he mentioned, and like mobility with a strong focus on automotive, this is one of the ecosystems where also the figures are quite reliable. But there are others where he's not sure, and that's why also we can from our side not distribute anything. And so there might be still changes in which are the 14 ecosystems, or maybe there are not even 14 ecosystems, but it depends also on how we so that's why, I mean, most of them get slowly stabilized.
We are losing your voice. We are not hearing you now, Ulla. Sorry. I don't know if you are speaking.
Okay, I had finished. Huh?
Thank you, Ulla. Thank you. Okay, I think the meaning is clear. Okay, I don't know. We could introduce here sectors or not. Or I think that it's important not to wait for too much in the publication of this form. Okay, fields. Okay, of intervention, the stage of the project, the relevance, the scope. Probably it's too long for me and too complex. We need to discuss on that, but it will be very good to have all this kind of information. The time scale, if there are evidences, the potential for learning and replication, a contact, and so on. We need to review that, okay? The idea is that it's important for us to have a clear, if you want to say, map of what we are doing. It's important to communicate, not only for communication, but also for the use of those best practices, of those ideas and those references. So we will quite quickly liberate it, I suppose, during today. Okay. In fact, the proposal is to have one specific session for a success story in 2 days, next Wednesday. So if you, I suppose that yes, if you have been developing activities helping the COVID crisis, please break them down and share it then with us. We will publish this in the ECCP forum, and we will fix a list of a summary of these references on the main topic, on the main area of the ECCP forum, just allowing everyone to return and to look for them. Okay. I was thinking about another possibility that I wanted to discuss with you today. That would be to, if thinking about how can we promote clusters to communicate these activities, because we know that we are very, very focused on actions, not so much on communication, and we need to promote them to share this. I was thinking about the possibility to give them some kind of label stating you have been making a collaborative, successful approach in the fight against coronavirus. I don't know if that will help or not, but it's just one idea. That's the proposal. As I say, we will start from tomorrow. No, from tomorrow, no. Another decision that we take yesterday is, as we have a very important meeting tomorrow at 10:30. Our recommendation is please register yourself for tomorrow's meeting with the ECCP. Also, please communicate that meeting to all your network. Participate, because it will not be only about the speeches, but also there are quite large time to discuss and to share at the end of the meeting, the second part of the tomorrow's web conference. So it's important to have you there. Okay. For today, the proposal is to review the rapid alert function proposals that we could have, and think about what do we need, possible solutions for those needs. Okay, so Ula, if you don't mind, would you introduce again to us the main ideas on the rapid alert function? Just a quick refresh.
Antonio, I have here today with me also my colleague Ellen Dars, who is a deputy of our unit, and she worked a lot on the proposal.
Welcome, Ellen.
You could.
Good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Would you like to take the presentator role? Do you have something to share, or it's enough with the?
Well, I can already present. I can present you with the voice the different aspects and what we have thought might be necessary to have a system in place which is efficient and which can actually give results within having too many intermediaries dealing with the data and having them a way of compiling data and quickly identifying critical companies. And there we saw that the clusters had a really very, very important role to play, because we consider that the first element to have this rapid alert system functioning properly will be actually to identify the companies which are critical within the EU, and for which we need to actually then have to make sure that they get the critical components that they might be missing, but also that they're not in a financial situation which is too difficult, and if they are in such a financial situation that they get appropriate funding quickly, or if they have a proposal to be bought over by another company, that the know-how and the capacities remain within the EU. So that's the first thing we believe which is essential, is to have this identification of companies which are critical. And there we saw that cluster organizations could play a very important role, because typically a cluster organization will know the companies in the cluster, so will know from a technological point of view if this company is really with cutting edge technologies or in a unique position on the market in the EU, which will also, even if it's some technology which might not be the latest one, but which is necessary for a number of applications, it's also important that we keep it within the EU. So we thought that the cluster organizations could start by making for themselves a preliminary listing of the companies where they think there is a high possibility that those companies will actually be critical, so that will probably not be all the companies in their cluster, and then that they start having some discussions. They can just call each of those companies to identify then the criticalness of those companies. So we thought it would not be impossible to put in place, most probably. I do not know what percentage of the companies in clusters on average might potentially be critical, so would have to be contacted, interviewed. But I guess it would not be more than 20%, which would be, let's say, suspect, if I may say so, in terms of workload for the clusters. Then, if a company is critical, and to assess also which are the technologies, we thought it would be important to collaborate also and to have a taxonomy of technologies which is widely used. And the Enterprise Europe Network has a technology taxonomy on its which is used already for their function to actually look for supplies in different components. And so it seems the most easy thing to do will be to use this taxonomy. And so we'll have to see how to actually develop a database which is using this taxonomy from the EEN. And on the basis of that, then once we have this system of database in place, the cluster could simply then encode the company which it considers to be critical on the data in the database in question, and associate it with the technology field to which it corresponds. So that would be the first step, the first pillar of the system. The second pillar would be to actually ensure that companies which are in difficulties can get quickly the funding which is necessary to survive. So let's be realistic. The economic crisis is of such a magnitude, not only because of the lockdown in the EU, because also because of the stop basically of international commerce. So many companies also have lost their outside markets. So we know there's going to be lots of demands, lots of companies. And that's where, again, the fact that we have identified beforehand the critical ones is important so that the files will be treated as a priority. Probably most of the companies, it would be a question of their local bank discussing with them, of having a mechanism which is going to channel EU relief funds to the local banks. But for some companies, it might require a very extensive refinancing or finding outside capital, another company helping, taking over. For all of that, in any case, we need to have a formal mechanism in place, I believe, some kind of Corona Credit Committee at regional level, associating the authorities, the management authorities which are in charge of the funds, also the clusters, the EEN, and the banks. And there also we saw that it probably for some companies which might not be savable because simply also the demand has evolved, a lot of things are changing now. It's important to keep the assets locally for local economic activity. So we thought if rather than destroying any kind of material, things which are available, if it's not, the companies cannot be saved, it would probably be interesting to try to then have some social economy enterprises taking it over, because it's in everybody's interest to maintain economic activity of some sort locally, also for the cluster community in that area. So that's the second thing. And then the third pillar is the one on which you have already been extensively working, is finding suppliers and alternative suppliers. And there we think it's also important to have a mechanism which is working in a semi-automated way for the things which are easy to find, because there might be lots of demands. From what we have heard, the supply chains have been already massively disrupted. We also hear that it will not be easy to restart every company at the same time for different reasons, but also because of the cascading effect that one supply leads to one company not being to work, and then the next one in the chain not having it, etc. So it's a cascading effect. So that's why we know that it's going to be complex and that there might be lots of demands. It's important that it's dealt with very, very quickly. So there again, we thought that it could be possible to boost the existing mechanism of the Enterprise Europe network, the suppliers, finding suppliers application system, so that companies can then post what they need. Then how can they find it quickly? Because we know very well that not all the companies will look at all the demands. So there we thought it would be interesting to use this EEN again system, because then you can associate your demand to a technology field. And that's where again we thought clusters could have a major role to play, because we thought that clusters could then register themselves in the system as having companies in specific technological fields of this taxonomy. And then when there is a demand which is encoded for one specific field of the taxonomy in which they have indicated that they have companies, they will automatically get the request. And like that, they could see if they have a company which is able to provide and put the two companies quickly in contact. So that's for the most of the demands where there might be something available within the EU. And with other clusters, I think it will be much more difficult to have a quick answer. Because if you have to really post it like that and hope that the company will be by chance read the notice and that it has it, it's not going to be as efficient. So I really believe that without having a specific intermediary knowledgeable about all the companies which are capable of delivering such thing, it's not going to be very efficient. Then some components, then most probably there's no availability of the component in question yet in the EU. It might be more difficult or it might be very difficult to find. And there, your mechanism, your ECHA committee that you have put in place might then intervene to try to see if there is an alternative solution, if there is something we have not been thinking about, or if there is a necessity then to quickly have some other company adapting its manufacturing capacities to produce the component in question. And because then clearly it will be necessary if some company has to adapt and to alter its manufacturing capacities. This requires investments. It requires also a bit of knowledge of the market, and it's not some investments you would do if there's only like a very small demand. So that's something which is more complex, and where we saw that then ECHA could play a role potentially in collaboration, of course, with the EN and voila. So in a nutshell, that's it.
Very, very, very clear. I think that we will share these minutes with everyone in our cluster community because that's yeah, a clear map of what we can do. Thank you very much.
And you think it's feasible? You think it's feasible because we were sharing it with you like as a first thing, and we have not exactly yet shared it with so many people because first we wanted to make sure that this architecture you think is implementable and that the clusters can play the role I have presented.
We need to see how to link with the EN tools. Okay, that's very important because in the details we could so we need to look for that. Okay, but I think that it makes sense. It makes sense to look for the resources inside the clusters. We need also to cover those companies that are not inside the clusters, so it should be very clear that we need to look for every company, not only the cluster members, in my mind. Okay. And for that, we need to make that explicit. And yes, I think so. I think that it makes sense, and we can do that. The question is that we need to see how to make the next steps, how to relate with the European Enterprise Network. We need resources, some kind of resources, just to. Because this is a lot of dedication, as you know, and so we should clarify how to put them in place. Okay, but I would like to hear questions and opinions from the rest of the group.
Good morning, it's
Veronica.
Yeah, good morning. So thank you very much, Hélène and Nuala, of course, for sharing with us the structure that I think is very practical and concrete and ready to go, because you are talking, if I'm not wrong, about something that is already in place, that has been used up to date only by the EEN network. So, I mean, the taxonomy and the classification is already in place and perfect. Maybe coming back to what Antonio was just saying, how to cover also the companies outside clusters. And in this, I think that you should also, that was already cited in the joint roadmap, the communication. You should rely very much also on industry associations, because while me as cluster is somehow vertical, so I have a better overview of a supply chain, of a value chain, okay, in one sector. I might have, of course, better information to identify breaks in my value chain. But if I go outside my sector, it becomes very difficult to me to know what's happening. While industry associations gather, of course, companies no matter their sector, plus they provide to their members on daily services such as accounting, preparing paychecks, and so on. So I think that the first disruption that a company might have, the industry association taking care of these basic services is immediately aware of some problems. So for this couple of reasons, I do think that you should also empower industry associations to do this and to fill in the EEN database to cover territories. Okay, so to have a wider mapping, so you can cross a more vertical competence and knowledge and overview from clusters to wider economic sectors.
Veronica,
Okay.
as far as my experience, sorry, Ellen. Go on, Ellen.
No, fine. Continue, please.
As far as I know, here, at least here in Spain, the EEN network includes usually the industry associations.
No.
So they are included, as far as I know.
Yeah, for instance, okay, maybe they don't cover all, or at least this is the situation in Tuscany, because we have two EEN points. One is from, let's say, the one out of the two representatives of commercial activities, and one is from the biggest industries. So craftsmen are missing, for instance. So, and the craftsmanship, meaning the majority of SMEs, are not covered in our two EEN, okay, points. So just
that's open. Another question is that is related to the ecosystem. I thought, but Ellen will say if it is right or not. I thought that the rapid alert function was designing to work on those main ecosystems, at least on the critical ones, not on every one of the economic activities on Europe. I could be mistaken. And I think that, that we could nominate some kind of leaders between the clusters members, okay, for each of those ecosystem, and let them make the connection, the needed connections. Because I think that if we want to be practical, we should not create a very, very complex organization or function, alert function. If we want to be to achieve results, quick results, I think that the best way to do that would be to nominate experts on every one of those ecosystems or sectors, whatever you want to call them, but experts from the cluster community able to reach for anyone that should be contacted, meaning able to reach for the business association if they think that they need to contact them, or regional authorities, or whoever. they think that they need. Okay, but in my opinion, if we want to assure that we reach quickly for the critical information, we need to nominate people and let them work.
So if I might make a proposal, that might be part of the mandate and of the Corona Credit Committee, maybe, to make sure that there is a minimum of coordination at regional level to identify the companies. Like that, the work would be shared, and the clusters would say, we will contact those companies and share the list, and then the EN will look at other companies, so to avoid a duplication of work.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. More questions or more comments?
Yes, Antonio, can I say a brief comment? I really agree with that idea that you defend, that the clusters must be the node of a global network where the information must be diffused. And I think when Ellen was speaking about the value chain and the need of recreation of the value chain because of the lacks that we are having now, it's important, in my opinion, the capacity of putting in a connection the big corporations and the multinationals and the SMEs. We had the experience from SEAGA in one comment that we had 2 days ago about the automotive sector in Galicia, where we have the PSA, the big company that make the cars, and all the SMEs that are connected with it. And if we don't have the capacity, and the classes are very important for that, to guarantee that the networks between the SMEs, the startups, and other small companies are integrated in the value chain for the big companies, things will be very difficult. So I think this is also a good opportunity, and the classes have here a very, very important role to redefine, to redesign, to recreate this kind of networks that are very important for the value chain capacity of working.
Thank you, Jamie. I don't know if we need to redesign networks. I understand that the urgency is now to map them and to identify critical links or missing links or critical points. Okay, I understand that to redesign the networks is the next step. I could be wrong, but what we need to is to have very, very clear maps of the networks and a rapid alert system. My mind. More comments? Questions for Ellen?
Antonio, may I ask a question?
For sure.
Good morning, everyone. It's Gilles from Belgium. Just a question because if I'm not mistaken, Ellen, you mentioned that some digital or automated solutions or tools should be created. Could you give me an example or some precision about this kind of tool?
Well, for the time being, we thought that we have to build on what is existing. So the EN has this function which is existing, available on its website to search for suppliers. But maybe it should be boosted, and there should be an automation where the information for the request is sent, for example, to the clusters which have registered themselves as having companies in specific technological fields. So there we're really thinking about developing, but we have to see what is technically feasible, but developing a bit what is existing. That's one thing. For the critical companies, there probably we would need to create a new database. We have not identified yet, but we're still searching an existing tool which could be used or developed or improved for that purpose. But if we manage to put that in place, in any case, we would also use the same taxonomy. It has to be linked to the other. So that's quite important. Because, well, hopefully, if at some point we had such a system in place and where the clusters and the EN would encode for each technology field the critical companies, it would also enable an analysis later of this data from the other side. That is, look in technology fields if we have companies or not, because then we could actually realize that there are some technological fields where we have maybe only one company or a few, or no company at all within the EU. And the fact that it's being done, this encoding on systematically on a large scale will enable this visibility. But of course, that will take time. That will not be immediate, but that will be very interesting also for the future to orient EU investments in some specific technological fields where we'll then have the demonstration that we do not have it within the EU. But it's still really at the analysis level. What I'm presenting today is really what we thought would make sense from an architectural point of view, how one pillar will support the other, and we have those three pillars which are supporting each other. But we still have to decide exactly how to implement it. But first, we wanted to test the ground with you, since the clusters will have a major play to role in this architecture, to see if you think it is feasible for you. That's why we're sharing it with you.
So as far as I understand, there will be different levels of implication. Every cluster should include should use this database to introduce the resources, the members, their capacities, and there should be also some kind of, if I understand, some kind of coordination level, probably at regional or national or even European levels, no? Just to allow
I think it's a regional. It's better first at regional level also for the credit committees. I think that first the thing has to be done at regional level, and later for looking at for the if there are some very big issues where it could be looked at European level. But most of the work we have to have this subsidiarity approach. What can be done at local level has to be done at local level.
Okay. I think it will be important to have a look at those tools, the taxonomy. If we could have a look at the taxonomy, it would be important, because probably it's fully developed, but could be that I don't know, because I don't know the taxonomy. We should also know about if you decide to go ahead with that scheme, what kind of implications could we have on the first steps, mainly on the first steps of the coordination of this relationship with the EEN and so on. More questions? Or comments? Ilaria.
Good morning. Yes, hi to everyone. I think it could be very useful to make a trial, a simulation in a practical way. Maybe, I don't know if we can use a section in order to test in a specific, or some one of us can try to really practical develop and identify a starting list of critical SME concerning materials and technologies, and try to develop in a practical way and see how it works.
I think so. Ula.
Yeah, maybe if I can come in here. So we are really at the beginning of our thinking. What we shared today with you is what we are really working on. So it is not something which is already in its final shape. And the idea is that we tested it with you to get your feedback, also to see where you see difficulties that we might need to take into account, and proposing a pilot also is a good idea. But also, just to let you know, we are really at the beginning. We will have during the morning a meeting with our EN colleagues to start discussing, because of course they also have made themselves some thoughts about what could they deliver for the rapid alert function. We will discuss with them, and we don't even know whether they agree with our ideas. So just to let you know, it's really, we are sharing ideas, a real co-creation process. And that's why then I saw also a comment from Aurora in the chat. Of course, then at a later stage, we have to take and inform in the governments, because similar activities might go on. And for this, we have special working groups in the council where we can present it to, but we are not yet there. We are really a step before that, because we are in the consultation phase.
Thank you, Ulla. More?
Thank you. So I thank you, Ulla, for the explanation. So I can add this point. I think it's very useful to set the clear mechanism as an open portfolio. I mean the companies evolve over time, so it's really good to consider the entry and the exit from this list. I mean, how to manage this, because also needs are changing over time. So the dynamic dimension, for me, it's really important.
It will depend of the database and how it's possible to manage it. That's why I was speaking about the need to see the details, the real tool and how to manage it, and the possibility to link it with our cluster numbers and so on. I really think that I will insist, sorry, in this idea that if everything is, I understand that everything should be in the basic and the basis organized by regions, but I really think that we should have some kind of coordination through value chains or sectors or ecosystem and so on, because I'm totally sure that some, for example, some missing links or missing function or capacities in one region could be perhaps located in other regions, or some companies could be saved or bought by other companies in other regions. So it's very, very important to have some at a European level, at least European level. I think it's critical, in fact.
What I believe is that what can be solved at local level, since there would be a lot of things to solve, it should be solved at local level. And then, indeed, if there's no solution found either by the automatically with a request on the EN website, where clearly you will have suppliers from all across the EU, or at local level, then yes, then it should be discussed in a larger frame. But I think it's important to make sure that everything which is solvable at local level can be solved at local level. Otherwise, it will be simply too much to deal with, and then the system will not be able to be operational. So yes.
Okay.
Can I add something, Antonio? Good morning to everybody. I think that, again, there is a role of clusters on this point, because clusters cross different regions. So they can even identify the problems and try to identify solutions, because they know a little bit about other regions.
Yeah, I think so. Totally. Thank you, Vasco. More comments or questions?
And to connect with the needs of the supply chain, because for strategy of what is important, not only to keep but also to build, we might need to analyze the imports that Europe does.
That is related to the, yeah, but I think that companies has the knowledge, and probably clusters also has the knowledge about what are the key flows, logistic flows, and
So we to include also that point of view.
Yeah, thank you. More comments. David, would you comment? Have you put something in the chat? Would you comment? Or is, I know he has left. Okay. Okay. More.
Antonio, sorry, only one more comment about the question of the communication. I think it's very important to reinforce, in fact, as you were telling, and also Ellen, that governments and other institutions recognize the role that clusters have in terms of putting together all these campuses. So I reinforce the question of the communication, the dissemination, and the good practice.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that I will propose you, Ellen. We are available. We are at your disposal. Ulla also, as you know. I think that it's very important to start the dialogue with the knowledge of other possible tools. Answering your question, I think it makes sense. Yeah. What would you need from our side, Ellen? How can we help you now in a very, very, very practical way?
Well, the first thing would be to tell us today if you think it's not feasible, or if something has to be changed totally, before we start discussing this architecture with other players like the EN colleagues. That's the first thing. And but you can also, think about it today and let us know later. It doesn't have to be in the minutes. Because the first thing for us was to see if you thought that actually at local level, the clusters could engage in that mission of contacting their companies and identifying the ones which are potentially critical. It would not have been, it should be an approximate exercise, no responsibility on the cluster side if they miss something or wrongly indicate the company as critical. But we have to devise a system which is easy to implement and which should be at least, let's say, 80% accurate. We're not aiming for 100% accuracy either. So the first thing was to see if you thought the clusters could play this role, and then if the clusters could also play this role of getting automated information of the requests for supplies where they have companies, and then look at them, and if there is they have a company which could answer, ready to then answer and put the demand and the offer together. That was the important thing. And then the third, for the more complicated case, is the value chain approach. See if yes, ECA could envisage to eventually play a role. Yes.
My opinion is that yes, we could do that, and we could promote the implication of the different cluster and regional levels, because this will be a service for their members. My opinion is that we should give them some kind of mandate, official mandate, in order to allow them to better contact with not only the members but those other companies in their regions that could be critical. Because if they are not members, they will probably be able to identify them through their members or through the knowledge of the sector. So it's very important in that point to have some kind of official mandate, I think, just to be effective. Yeah, I think so. And from the I would say that it's very, very important from my point of view, the capacity to link regions at European level, or national, but European level, as I said before. But the main incognita now, the main question for me is how easy or not will be to link with the not the EEN on itself, but the tools on the EEN. It's for me it will be important to have a look at them or meet them and explore how this linking could be done. But I think it's clearly, and there is clearly a need to join forces, and if they have the resources, we need to reinvent anything. That's my opinion, but if somebody has another one.
Antonio, I agree with you on the international coordination. It's really important just to optimize what we have at European level. It's really important, and I am wondering if it can be done as a cluster managers governance group instead of the regional administration, in order also to avoid some bureaucracy that is not helping with this aim. I don't know if you, if I am clear, or do you think this coordination at international level can be done at the cluster level? I mean, with cluster people, cluster managers.
I would propose to do that with cluster managers, a specialist, if you want to say, a high level specialist, and we could propose and then to Ule's team, and they will decide. But I think that's very important to have somebody for every sector or whatever you want to call them, with a general view from our side. I probably from the EEN side also, I don't know, but from our side, I think that we have very good people with a high level of knowledge of the sectors, and I propose to identify at least one, give him or her some kind of technical support for the practical job, let them coordinate the different regions or actors through Europe. I think if we need that general view. I think my mind. More.
Veronica again. So I have one more question to Hélène, if possible. If she, because she talked about, of course, targeting the most critical companies at European level in the value chains. So my very first reaction would be, okay, it's an easy task to me, because into my value chain I already know what are the critical companies I mean, that have a leading role in the value chain, that have a high number of suppliers and so on. So I want to understand what is really the target, because if this is the interpretation, I think we have such a kind of easy job, and we are looking for the leaders in the value chain. Okay, and just have a double check, a continuous check about their well-being, economic well-being. But maybe you are looking for something more precise, more let's say, not just leading roles in the value chains, but it's about doing something special in the value chains. If you can better define what's your target.
Okay, so clearly the definition of what is critical and what is not critical is not straightforward. There are two aspects. There are the aspect of the fact that you need this company to deliver supplies to a number of other companies, and then there is a cascading effect, and there is not an alternative supplier within the EU. So that could be for something which is even very basic, which is not high tech, but if it's missing, simply the rest of the value chain is stopping. So if this basic thing is readily available close by in Europe, then if there is an alternative supplier, and there I suppose that the companies which are selling something, logically they should have an idea of whether they have competitors within the EU or not. Logically, most of the companies, they know that. So that's where we think it's important that the clusters, they talk to the companies, they call them, and to really assess that. So that's the first dimension. Then there is a second dimension, which is technological. That is technologies where either already know they are very important, they are cutting edge, and we see obvious industrial applications, or some companies which are currently also developing some other technologies which might be important in the future. So that is something else which is more difficult to assess, and where maybe it's better to identify too many companies and to list them preliminary as potentially critical than to miss some. And why? Because also we know very well that we depend on supplies from outside the EU in terms of raw materials, for example. Some of those raw materials, we might have some serious difficulties of supply in the near future for different reasons. So maybe there are some technologies which are presently being developed or not used yet, which might offer an alternative way of producing things, which will not make us depend on those raw materials which we might not have. So that's one thing. The other thing is that clearly, since we will have probably some substantial industrial changes in the future, because many companies will have to change their way of producing, their business model, etc. We will have to integrate, to do it in a way which is also green, environmentally reasonable. We have also to think about more digitalization. So there are also a number of technologies will be important in the future for this industrial transformation. So they're not necessarily used yet by the bulk of the companies, but they have an important potential. And so that's why there are different levels of criticalness. It's very difficult, I believe, to give a very precise definition. But I think that probably clusters being in the business world, they can make educated guesses. And as I said, we do not aim for a system which will be 100% correct. The important thing is that at least if we can have an easy system which enables to quickly identify, let's say, 80% of the companies which are critical, that's already something. It's better than aiming for perfection and having something which is working in 5 years when it's too late. What we want is to have something which enables 80% of identification, but in an easy manner and quickly. So that's a bit of thinking. We have to there make a trade-off between perfection and efficiency. Yes.
But I will not say, Veronica, I will not say that it is easy. I think that okay, perhaps to detect the bottlenecks or the problems in the logistic channel, yeah, will be not so difficult, but to propose solutions that can be complex. Very complex.
I would like to add to say something. Veronica, I totally agree with what you ask. And thinking about our industrial district land in Italy, all the value chain are so interconnected, and I mean, the question of Veronica is very important in order to find an answer. Are we looking for leading companies that coordinate, that are able also to manage and coordinate orders, and also to manage subcontractors with other specializations? Or are we looking for really any kind of process and technologies and contracting? I mean, we have system integrators in the value chains, and we cannot avoid that if some small and medium enterprise, if she does not have the management, the adequate management in order to dialogue with the possible challenge and emergency, is not useful to have it in the list. We need to have those who are able to manage and to rapidly be ready and coordinate, maybe also other contractors. And I think that, but yes, I'm thinking about the context of where Veronica is working, so the railway sector, where this is really more important.
Thank you, Ilaria, for understanding. Indeed, of course, my point of view is very personal, because I manage a value chain, a cluster dealing a value chain that is small, in the sense that the suppliers of rail technologies that are so complex, like defense systems, is a work for few people indeed. So putting it in these terms, I would put under control immediately some of my companies. And first of all, because in the last few years, they were bought by non-European companies. And this for the inability of our, let's say, industrial sector and governments to avoid these losses. But okay, this is another problem. But just to say that if you are looking for us as clusters, because we are nodes of value chains, what Ilaria was highlighting is that into the value chains there are some other nodes, the system integrators, that have already, for their daily job and daily business, a wide overview of big parts of the value chain. So that's why I think, at least for me, it can be easier to make these identifications.
I don't. I late because it's 9:30, and we should close quickly. But I'm not sure that I fully understood your reality. So probably we need to speak later or about it, just to, because I will say that if there is one very small company in your cluster that is critical for the process, even if they are not able to manage very well themselves, we should look at those kind of critical links, critical companies.
Yes, indeed, but yes, it's a bit complex, and again, I think that each value chain, okay, some rules are of course the same, but there are of course other situations that can be fair. But in any case, I think that yes, the answers that have been provided by Elena are quite clear. No, are very clear, of course. And I think that the idea to focus on what is really critical, not just in the short term, but in the longer term for the overall EU competitiveness on the world stage is really important. So I think this exercise is important now, but has a great future. And yes, so thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. So we should close. Ellen, would you give us your last impressions?
So I thank you for all your feedback. I'm pleased to hear that the architecture as such, the pillars of it seem to be. So I think that's
Thank you. I don't know if
to you.
was...
So I think that's important that we know that also that the clusters might. Sorry, I don't hear you.
I had some
I
communication
lost connection.
problems. Yeah.
Antonio?
Could you put off your video perhaps and repeat, because we, at least myself, I didn't hear you. Perhaps without the video we could have better quality of the voice. Could you try again? Because we didn't
You hear me better now? You hear me better?
Yes. Now
Okay.
it's better.
Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to say, so thank you for your feedback. It was important for us to hear at first what we thought about architecture would potentially work for the clusters, and to have your feedback. As we have explained, it's really only still preliminary thinking and preparatory on our side, but we wanted first to test with you if it is potentially feasible. So now we have to see with the EN and with other, if we can actually put this system in place. So it's not yet totally decided. Voila. Thank you so much.
You are very, very welcome. Thank you, everybody. Tomorrow we will not have the session at 8:30, but at 10:30 with the ECCP. Again, I will ask you to disseminate the opportunity to join us tomorrow in your networks, and also please prepare some references of what you have been doing or are doing or are planning to do on the fight against coronavirus. We need to share those references. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.